Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, today is Houston Texans Breakdown Day, so that's what we're going to do. First off, though, probably pretty important that we talk about this injury report, because it's kind of big. I mean, it's what we've been talking about this whole time. Kind of seemed like, without having a lot of insight into the Texans and not knowing much about them, I thought they're probably going to be fine, right? I mean, maybe they just handle injuries differently. This is, if you talk to a Texans guy, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about, they're going to be fine. Turns out that's not the case. They got a lot of people out. So right now, for the Green Bay Packers, Wicks and Wooden are the only ones that are questionable. So Jair, Kenny, Ford, Elton Jenkins, Kraft, Myers, Reed, and Watson are all full go. Wicks and Wooden questionable. Don't want to say too much, but this is one of the better outlooks that we've had in terms of not having to panic about critical players. Hate to say it about Wicks, but let's be honest, this guy has been a liability these past few weeks. Maybe he needs to sit down for a week and figure it out. I don't know. The real story here is the Texans. And again, we've been through all this. We'll talk about it a little bit today, but man, oh man, Fatu Kasi, the defensive tackle, I believe it's their DT2 or 3, I can't remember. He's questionable. He did get to practice a little bit on Friday. Steve Sims was added to the injury report, another wide receiver. He's a little further down, but they're out a decent chunk of wide receivers, including Robert Woods. Steve Sims will be questionable. Out are Azeez Al-Shaair, Kamari Lassiter, Henry To'oto, Jimmy Ward, the safety, Robert Woods, the wide receiver. All of them are out in this game. And as I said, none of these guys are, low-end people that don't really play anyway, so it's not a big deal. The closest would be Robert Woods, but again, with the injuries they have at wide receiver, Woods would have been wide receiver 3, so they're down 2 of their top 4 wide receivers right now. Not the best. But with that being said, let's get started ripping through this thing. So, as per usual, I want to start last year just to get familiarity with the uncommon opponent. First of all, actually, let's go back 2 years just for a second. 2022, they were 3-13-1 under Lovie Smith. New coaching staff, new quarterback. They go to 10-7 with C.J. Stroud and DeMeco Ryans. Actually got off to a little bit of a slow start. They went 3-4 to start their first 7 games, the first 8 weeks. Wasn't looking good. In fact, they lost to the Carolina Panthers week 8 to make them go to 3-4. Then they went on a bit of a win streak, ended up, as I said, at 10-7. Got into the playoffs, beat the living daylights out of the Cleveland Browns 45-14, but then got destroyed by the Baltimore Ravens 34-10. They ended that season with the 13th best offense via points, 11th best defense via points. Right now, the Texans off to a significantly better start at 5-1. As far as points are concerned, they're not that different. Offense 14th, defense 15th. But their only loss came against the Vikings, and it was 34-7. Now, with that said, it should be noted that they've only played 2 talented teams. One is the Vikings. They got eviscerated. The other is the Bills. They won by 3. Their other wins were a 2-point win against the Colts, which is rough, a 6-point win over the Bears, which is bad, a 4-point win over the Jaguars, which is a joke, and then they blew out the New England Patriots. Usually, as the season goes on, I kind of like to look at, when a team wins, when a team loses. It's difficult when they've only lost 1 game and it was a 7-34 game. It's hard to say, well, if you score 34 points, or if you hold them to 7, then you got a good shot at winning. They won when they only scored 19. They won when they allowed 27. It's hard to kind of pin them down on that. Kicking over to DVOA to get a little bit of context as far as how talented of a team they are. DVOA has them ranked as the 6th best team 2 spots ahead of the Packers, who are ranked 8th. They have them listed as the 17th best offense compared to the Packers being 5th, but the second best defense behind only Minnesota, Green Bay ranking 15th. Also, forgot to mention their change from last year to this year. They did a lot this offseason to try to improve. Aziz Al-Shair, one of the guys that is not playing, was one of their additions. He got a 3-year, $34 million contract out of Tennessee. Fatukasi, another guy that's injured, they got him for 1 year, $3 million from Jacksonville. Other guys they went and got, they got Delshon Phillips from Baltimore, Jacob Phillips from the Cleveland Browns, Daniil Hunter from Minnesota, Danico Autry from Tennessee, Mario Edwards from Seattle, Tim Settle from the Bills, Miles Bryant from New England, Jeff Okudah, who's from Atlanta, Mike Ford, Cleveland, Lonnie Johnson, New Orleans, C.J. Henderson, Carolina, David Sharp, Carolina, Tommy Townsend, Kansas City. So they picked up a lot of guys in free agency. In the draft, their first pick was Kamari Lassiter, one of the guys that's injured, cornerback out of Georgia. They also got Blake Fisher, the tackle out of Notre Dame, Kalen Bullock, who is, I believe, currently their starting safety, especially with the injury and whatnot. Cade Stover, tight end, Jamal Hill, linebacker, Jawar Jordan, running back, Solomon Byrd, defensive end, Marcus Harris, defensive tackle, Ladarius Henderson at guard. With that, let's get into the team here. C.J. Stroud, currently a 78 passing grade, solid. Already has 1,576 yards, 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He has 9 big-time throws, 7 turnover-worthy plays. That's 4.1% big-time throw, 2.8% turnover-worthy plays. One thing to keep an eye on, though, was C.J. Stroud and the offense in particular. The Packers tend to be more of a second-half team. We may have to be patient. That is to say, if things don't go well in the first half, hold on. Because the Packers tend to do better in the second half. Also, the Texans have been having some problems, C.J. Stroud again in particular, with maintaining momentum through the second half. There have been several instances of kind of just sputtering or dying in the second half. So the way I see it, if we can keep it close or possibly even have the lead, obviously that would be ideal, by halftime, I think we're in great shape. At the very least, though, keep it close. Also, as far as rushing, C.J. Stroud is not anybody's idea of some kind of a prominent rushing quarterback. He so far has 75 rushing yards, 0 touchdowns, and 2 fumbles. Most rushing yards he's had in a game is 27. That was against Buffalo. So hopefully the Packers are not going to have to worry about something that's been obviously a concern for a lot of the weeks so far this season. Quick look at some of the statistics. CPOE, he ranks 11th. He's actually tied with Justin Fields at 10th at positive 1.7%, so 1.7% above expectation. His EPA per dropback is 12th, just 1 spot ahead of Jordan Love. So, look, I like Stroud. I think Stroud is a good quarterback. I think there was a period of time where I thought this guy could be a superstar, and maybe he can still get to that point. I think he is just a really consistently solid, good quarterback. He's the type of guy that's going to give you 70s every week as far as PFF grades go. He's probably going to have a lot of years where he is one of the top quarterbacks and maybe a few years where he's not. But again, bottom line, I don't want to undersell him because he's talented, but I don't also want to oversell him as though he's a premier, it's weird because who do we even say here? I guess you could say Pat Mahomes, although he hasn't been off to the best start. Dare I say Jaden Daniels? He's not Josh Allen. How about that? All right, let's move on. We've already talked kind of a lot about the receivers, but let's run through it one more time. Nico Collins is far and away the best receiver. He's second in receptions behind Stephon Diggs, but is number 1 in yards at 566. He's tied for number 1 in touchdowns, and his receiving grade is a 92.4. Not going to look it up, but let's just say probably the best in football. 3.49 yards per route run is pretty freaking wild. 67 yards is his longest. Just 1 drop on the season. He is 60% on his contested catches and a 128 passer rating when targeted. He is on IR. That is a gift. That is an absolute gift to the Packers. Their next highest graded receiver is actually Joe Mixon, but we'll get to that. He's just got 8 receptions, 74 yards. He does have a touchdown. Stephon Diggs is the number 2, now the number 1 wide receiver. He is at a 78. Let's call it about an 80. Still a good wide receiver for sure. He's very consistent. It's not like one of those he's been bad, but he's got like a 90 mixed in. His first 2 games, he's actually played his first 3 games mostly in the slot. His last 3 games have mostly been the boundary. I know that probably changes when your number 1 goes down, but he started that week 4. Also, it's just weird in general. I guess I didn't really realize. He's been actually above 50% in the slot all the way through week 5. It wasn't until this past week when he did become wide receiver 1 that he dropped to 28%, but he's primarily been in the slot. Either way, his first 2 games were his lowest graded, and it was a 68 and a 61. After that, 72, 77, 75, 73. Just very, very consistently solid every single week. He is the C.J. Stroud of wide receivers right now. But 37 receptions, 392 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1.81 yards per route run. That has gone up the last 2 weeks, as you would probably expect, as he moves up the ladder a little bit. He didn't even get to 1 in week 1. And then it was, 1.21 the last 2 weeks, 2.16 and 2.66. So it's slowly creeping up again, especially with Nico Collins being on IR. His longest reception was just 28 yards. He does have 2 drops. He is just 33% on contested catches, but he has a 113.8 passer rating when targeted. His catch rate over expected is plus 9.1%, which is pretty high. He's actually ahead of Nico Collins by a little bit, only behind Dare Ogunbowale. His EPA is a 17.3. For comparison, of our wide receivers, let's see, where was he at with catch rate? He's at 9.1%. That is higher than everybody except Christian Watson and Ben Sims. And his EPA of 17.3 is higher than everybody except Jaden Reed, who's at a 19.8. So just slightly below Reed and well above everybody else. Romeo's the next highest at 7.8. He is, however, the lowest on his team in average separation at 3 yards, but that's still above Watson and Romeo Doubs and Bo Melton and Andrew Beck. After that, the next highest graded is another running back, again, Ogunbowale. He's had 16 targets, 15 receptions, 155 yards, and a touchdown. Definitely get the running backs involved in the passing game. Mixon, as I said, was less, but he's only played in half as many games. He's only played in 3 games so far. So expect them to get the running backs involved for sure. But then we get to technically wide receiver 2, who is Tank Dell. Tank Dell was an absolute phenom last year. He and Nico were 2 of the highest graded wide receivers as a rookie. He had 47 receptions, 709 yards, 7 touchdowns, but an 83.4 grade, 83.3 receiving grade. Absolutely on fire. Has gotten off to a much slower start this year. His highest graded game was this past week against New England, 75 receiving, but he's at just a 66.5. He is at 1.12 yards per route run. He hasn't even cracked 2 yards per route run in a single game yet. He did have his highest this past week against New England. Again, it is becoming a more crowded wide receiver field with Stephon Diggs getting added to the group. He's back to his wide receiver 2 role now, so maybe he'll flourish there. I don't really know. Somewhat of a surprise, when you see a guy that's 5'8", 165, you just automatically assume, especially when he's not really a speed guy. He's 5'8", 165, 4.49 speed. You would assume he'd have to be in the slot. What utility could he possibly have on the boundary? He's not. He's not this year. He wasn't last year. The most amount of slot snaps he played was last year, week 5, 40%. But he's just the opposite of everything you think. He's a boundary receiver, and he is 3 for 3 on his contested catches at 5'8", 165. But he has a 79.2 passer rating when targeted. His catch rate over expected is just 2.5% higher than expected, and his receiving EPA is plus 3.5. So pretty baseline average, slightly above, which is exactly what his PFF grade would reflect. It's pretty average, but slightly above. Yards after the catch over expected is -3, which is, almost exactly average, just a little bit below. And he is the second lowest on his team in separation, just slightly above Stephon Diggs at 3.1 yards on average. After him is tight end Brevin Jordan. He's at a 61 grade. He's only had 2 receptions, 7 yards, so he's not as utilized in the offense. Then you have running back Cam Akers. He's got a 57 grade. He's got 4 receptions, 16 yards. Then another running back, Dameon Pierce, 1 reception, 1 yard. Then you get wide receiver Xavier Hutchinson. Now remember, Robert Woods is the next man up, but he is out in this game in terms of like actual usage on the team. So rookie Xavier Hutchinson is going to have to step up and be wide receiver 3. There may be some kind of a rotation here, but he's a 6th-round pick out of Iowa. He is the Allen Lazard of this team. There's always those Iowa State guys, or I said Iowa, didn't I? Iowa State guys that are kind of bigger builds, later round picks that, just big physical guys or whatever. 6'2", 205, hasn't super panned out. I mean, it's panned out as well as you could expect for a rookie 6th-round pick, but through 6 games, he's played 60 snaps where he's run a route. He's been targeted 6 times, which is not terrible, I guess. Well, maybe it is. 1 in 10 times when you're certainly more than 1 of 10 options. But just caught 3 of those 6 for 34 yards, no touchdowns. And 31 of those yards came in 1 game. So he only caught 1 pass for 1 reception in 1 other game. That was week 1. He's played a larger role in weeks 5 and 6, and again in week 6, no targets. He has a 55 PFF grade. His highest graded game so far was against Buffalo, where he had the 31 yards. They still only gave him a 63.5 grade. Currently, right now, 0.57 yards per route run. So again, I like that metric because it breaks down exactly, what it is you want to know. Every time I have him run a route, how much production is he giving me? And the answer is a half a yard. It's not great. He's 0 for 1 on contested catches and has a 67.4 passer rating when targeted. He also has 1 drop, which normally isn't bad, but when you have 1 drop compared to 3 receptions, that's a pretty terrible ratio. He is, good Lord, he is dead last on his team with a negative 39.9 catch rate over expected. So 40% less receptions than they feel he should have. The only person on our team that has that is Andrew Beck. And I know a lot of you are saying, who the heck is Andrew Beck? Why do you keep saying that name? He came out and ran 2 routes and had, no receptions. So there you go. The only guy that has less, and really think about this. How many drops does Dontavian Wicks have? He's just at a negative 26.8. Negative 26.8. This guy's at negative 40. That's how bad it's been for Xavier Hutchinson. And this is, again, their wide receiver 3, pending some kind of a change. I mean, they did bump him up week 5 and then bump him back week 6. We'll see. With Robert Woods out, it doesn't leave a ton of options. His EPA is the second lowest, ahead of only Dalton Schultz, interestingly enough, negative 3.6. Speaking of, next highest graded is Dalton Schultz. This is their tight end 1. We'll go back through and kind of sort like who their number 1 targets are based on routes and targets and whatnot. Dalton Schultz is up there. We're going through the wide receivers, but he is, let's actually do it right now. Dalton Schultz is going to be receiver number 2. If you look at routes run, Nico missed a game, Tank Dell missed a game, but it's Stephon Diggs, then Dalton Schultz, then Tank Dell, then Nico Collins, then Ogunbowale. Then Robert Woods, who's out, then Xavier Hutchinson. After that, you got to go way down. John Mechie's the only other guy that's played. He's not very good. He's only run 16 routes. So you say, well, Xavier Hutchinson hasn't been good, so they'll probably just get somebody else. Yeah, there's nobody else, man. They got a good group of wide receivers, but when you're down 2, it's tough. Maybe the Packers can pull that off, but that's about it. As far as teams that can be without 2 and still manage. Oh, man, we just have Reed and Wicks? Oh, shucks. They still have Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs, which maybe is similar, but it's not easy. It's especially not easy finding a third. But Schultz, 55 PFF grade, 18 receptions on 31 targets, 143 yards. He has 0 touchdowns, 0.72 yards per route run, which is definitely not great. If he's running the second most routes on your team and is not producing every time you put him out there on a route, that's just flat out inefficiency. His longest reception was 23 yards. He is 40%, 2 of 5. Is that 40%? I guess it is. I don't know why that twisted my brain like that's not right. 40% on contested catches, just a 56.3 passer rating when targeted. He does not have, according to them, any drops. Catch rate over expected, again, second worst on the team, negative 23.8. That's about as bad as what you're getting from Wicks. They also have Cam Akers, who's at a negative 23.8. So there's 3 guys that are about at the level of Wicks or worse, which is really saying a lot. He's dead last in receiving EPA with a negative 8. Now, that's probably cumulative because of, how bad he's been. Let me look at EPA per target here. He's quite a bit higher on EPA per target. He's just been targeted a lot. But it's still negative 0.27 every single time he's targeted. Robert Woods, Dameon Pierce, Cam Akers, Xavier Hutchinson, John Mechie, and J.J. Taylor are worse in that order. And then yards after the catch over expected. You always hope your tight end can get you a couple extra yards. He's at negative 3, which is cumulative, so you call it about even, but still, you would hope that you would cumulatively be building in the correct direction. For example, Tucker Kraft leads our team with 62 yards over expected. Luke Musgrave is about on par with what they're getting from Dalton Schultz. Luke Musgrave is at a negative 4, and he's hardly played at all. But still, you get the idea. After that is John Mechie. We'll see how much usage he's going to get. Let's take a look at how much they put him in. Week 6 is when he played the most, so they did kind of get tired. So week 5, Xavier Hutchinson wasn't good. They said, okay, let's put Mechie in a little bit, do a little 50-50, see who comes out the best. So they put Xavier Hutchinson in for like 16 snaps. John Mechie's out for about 14 snaps. Mechie had 0 targets, 0 receptions for 0 yards and 0 touchdowns. So they let Hutchinson and Mechie split, right? None of them were targeted one time last week. So I don't know. I don't know that it matters. I think C.J. Stroud's like, yeah, we don't have a wide receiver 3. We got some tight ends, running backs, and 2 wide receivers here. But suffice it to say he's bad. All right, let's take our first break. We'll come back quickly, just kind of, I think we already went through the order. We'll look at running backs, offensive line, defense, and then we'll get up out of here. Yeah. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. So the two main running backs for the Houston Texans are Joe Mixon and Cam Akers. Mixon has played 3 games so far with 52 attempts. Cam Akers has played 5 games with 40 attempts. Mixon does have an ankle injury, but is going to play in this game. So I don't know if there's going to be some kind of a slightly heavier rotation toward Cam Akers or what, but it's going to be a split backfield for sure. In fact, actually, I might be lying. It may not be Cam Akers. It may be Dameon Pierce. So let me explain. So Joe Mixon played weeks 1, 2, and then he came back last week, week 6. Cam Akers, who's the only other one that has, somewhat significant snaps, started week 2. He played 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, but only got 2 attempts week 6. So Mixon comes back, gets 13 attempts. Cam Akers got 2. Well, that's because Dameon Pierce came in and got 8 attempts. So Pierce actually outsnapped Cam Akers, and that actually does make sense because Dameon Pierce appears to be a better running back. He wasn't super great last year with Houston. He was as a rookie. I don't really know, but so far, at least, again, very small sample size, just 2 games. He's got an 81 rushing grade so far, 8.4 yards per attempt. Week 1 against Indy was 5.3. He only had 3 attempts, but still. Then week 6, 8 attempts, 76 yards, 9.5 yards per attempt, and a touchdown. He has 8.27 yards after contact per attempt. Now, I don't think any of this is sustainable. His career, even with 8.4 right now, his career yards per attempt is 3.8. His career yards after contact per attempt is 3.04. So I don't know if he's just running roughshod over some bad defenses or what, but the bottom line is he's playing better than Cam Akers right now, who has 3.8 yards per attempt, 2.63 after contact, 151 yards and 1 touchdown. Dameon Pierce in 2 games almost has 100, has over 50%, let's just say. He has almost 100 rushing yards already. So I don't really know. I'm guessing it's going to be Mixon number one, then Pierce with a little bit of Cam Akers, but I don't know. Houston Texans seem very similar in terms of their taste in running backs. I mentioned Brian Gutekunst loves the 220-plus running backs. Joe Mixon, 6'1", 220. Cam Akers, 5'10", 217. Dameon Pierce, 5'10", 218. So, Mixon's a little bit taller at 6'1", but the shorter, stockier types that Gutekunst is all over. Houston Texans have a similar flavor for sure. If you look at the rush yards over expected, not surprisingly, Dameon Pierce is the highest. 3.7 yards over expected per attempt. That's freaking wild. Joe Mixon at positive 1.3. Cam Akers is a negative 0.9. So if you're wondering why they're slowly getting away from him, I'm sure they're just seeing what they're seeing and saying, okay, we have two good running backs and one guy that's not very good. This is pretty obvious. If you're wondering, Josh Jacobs has a rush yards over expected of 0.5. His rush EPA is a negative 21.8. That's freaking brutal. It's absolutely brutal. Dameon Pierce has the highest EPA or not even per rush, cumulative rush EPA on the team, despite only playing 2 games, at a positive 3.3. Joe Mixon is 0.8, and Mr. Cam Akers is negative 13.3. Not quite as low as Josh Jacobs, but he hasn't played as many snaps as Josh Jacobs. So that's my guess. Depending on the severity of the injury of Joe Mixon, which I'm guessing is low, it's probably better than it was last week. You're going to see Mixon with the majority of carries. Last week he had 13. Pierce had 8. Cam Akers had 2. Probably a similar split. And again, don't forget, as I mentioned, they like to get these guys involved in the pass game as well. Mixon in 3 games has 10 targets, 8 receptions. You got Ogunbowale seems to be their receiving back. That's kind of his main role. He's got 21 rushing attempts and 15 receptions, so the ratio is certainly there in his favor. It's possible, by the way, we see Ogunbowale a little more. As far as his rushing attempts, there was one game, week 5, where he ran the ball a bunch. Outside of that, not really a ton. He'll get mixed in a little bit, but it does seem to be he's more of the third down back, which makes sense because he's the smaller of the group. Ogunbowale, 5'11", 205. He also has 2.3 rushing yards per attempt. So, more of a receiver. Offensive line, kind of went through this already when we talked about Laramie Tunsil. He is good to go. He was on the injury report, but very, 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 very good tackle. 85 pass blocking grade, 70 run blocking. He's given up 5 pressures, including 2 sacks, so it's not impossible to get to the quarterback. But, it happens roughly once per game. And given our defensive line's track record, it's probably going to be closer to 0. Left guard is Kenyon Green. I kind of mentioned him briefly the other day, just as kind of an example. I think it was on Packernet After Dark. But, the Houston Texans have picked, aside from this past year, one time outside of the top 10 in the past, 5 years. And it was Kenyon Green, who I think they picked 13th. He is terrible. He's already given up 15 pressures, despite being an interior guy, which usually gives up less than exterior guys. 2 sacks, 1 hit, 12 hurries, 53 pass blocking grade, 52 run blocking grade. Hilariously, their backup is Kendrick Green, another Green. But, Kenyon is going to be that dude on the inside. Juice Scruggs is the center. For some reason, don't know who Juice Scruggs is. Did he change is he one of those guys that changed his name? Who the heck is Juice Scruggs? He was a second-round pick last year. Juice Scruggs. Penn State. I have no idea. That's weird. All right. Anyways, he's been pretty solid. He struggled last year. He had a 49 pass blocking grade, 55 run blocking. So far this year, though, 73 pass blocking, 69 run blocking. He did have one really bad game this past week. Otherwise, he's been completely solid. 8 pressures given up so far this year. Hasn't had any penalties since week 3. At right guard, they got Shaq Mason, who is a longtime New England Patriot, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he spent, 7, 8 years there, then Tampa, and then 2 years at Houston. He used to be a very, very good football player all around. Hilariously, his pass blocking, he's stayed very consistent throughout his entire career, which started in 2015, although 15 was bad. The run blocking is the thing that just completely turned off when he left New England. He was actually a better run blocker than pass blocker. A typical year from him would be like 85 run blocking, 73 pass blocking. He leaves New England, and all of a sudden it's low 60s run blocking. Right now it's 54 run blocking, but still a 74 pass blocking. He's also been relatively inconsistent, though. He's actually mostly low 70s and 60s as a pass blocker, but he's got 182 mixed in against Jacksonville, so I think it's a little bit misleading. Shaq Mason at 31 years old is not exactly the guy that he used to be. You'd probably expect a game of like a maybe 70 pass blocking, 60 run blocking kind of thing, which is still perfectly fine. I'm just trying to give you a more accurate picture. And then Titus Howard off the right side. Titus Howard is, again, another Packers type of guy. Decent enough pass blocking, not very good run blocking. 73 pass blocking. He's given up 1 sack, 1 hit, 11 hurries, 13 total pressures, and 56 run blocking. His worst game came this past week against New England, 43 run blocking grade. So the bad side is, I mean, it's not the greatest offensive line. It's not, the Lions, this powerhouse group of guys. But against a defensive line that isn't very good at stuff, 70s across the board should be more than adequate to get the job done. And against a quarterback that, does well under pressure anyways, 73 PFF grade, it's going to be pretty rough if the only way you can really generate pressure is to bring extra guys. Because now you're taking somebody out of the secondary to pressure a guy that can handle pressure and distribute to the open guy now that you took somebody out of the secondary. That's going to be a complicated problem to solve. But anyways, let's take our final break. We'll go through the defense. Since I didn't get this out on time to get out on Saturday, and this is Sunday, I also want to talk very briefly about the upcoming games. Sorry about that. I just ran out of time. It's going to be like 10:30 at night. And the biggest issue was it's not that I couldn't power through. My interest level dropped to 0, and I could hear it in my voice when I was recording. The last thing in the world I wanted to do was continue, and I'm like, let's just freaking wait. Let's just wait. So apologies for that. Take a break. We'll be right back. All right, let's get a look at this number 2 ranked defense. Surprisingly, they've only got 7 guys with 70 or higher grades, 2 of which do not actually play full time. On top of that, one of them is one of the guys that is out, Azeez Al-Shaair. So that really just leaves Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, Derek Stingley, and D'Angelo Ross, who is also a cornerback, although Ross also has only played 1 game, so that not even Ross, I guess. He just played a lot of snaps in that 1 game. So there's 4 guys with 70 or higher grades. One of them is injured. That leaves 3. Danielle Hunter, the only one in the 80s. But still, let's go through it, and I'm going to have to make sure I have my injury report up because I gotta remember there's a lot of guys on defense that are out. So, all right. Again, we kind of went through this when we went through the injuries, but let's do it again. The interior defensive line starts with Mario Edwards. Mario Edwards, been around a little while. He is 31 years old. He's a journeyman. Played 3 years for Las Vegas, 1 year for the Giants, 1 year for New Orleans, 2 years for Chicago, 1 year for Tennessee, 1 year for Seattle, and now his first year with Houston, and it's not going particularly well. 62 grade, 61 run defense, 48 tackling, 63 pass rush. He has 12 pressures and 2 sacks on 143 attempts, which might sound good compared to what we've got going, but it's not. That's sub 10%, especially for a number 1, 280-pound defensive tackle. Their number 2 is Fatou Kassi. Now, Fatou Kassi is questionable. He's the one that's not officially out. He is questionable, but it doesn't matter because Fatou Kassi has a 37 grade, 33 run defense grade, 58 pass rush. He has 6 pressures and a sack on 86 attempts. I almost would rather he plays because he's so bad. After that is Tim Settle, 39 PFF grade, 29 run defense. He has 13 pressures on 121 attempts, which is just above 10%. So that's decent enough, I guess. But Tim Settle, not particularly fantastic. And then Khalil Davis will probably get some action. It's actually, pretty close rotation between the second, third, and fourth. There is a little bit of a dip, but he's at a 59 grade, 58 run defense, 59 pass rush, 7 pressures, 75 attempts. So pretty average across the board. Not a very good defensive interior. After that, you get the edge guys, and I think this is partially the strength of their team. When you got two good edge guys and at least one lockdown corner, that does wonders for a defense. But Danielle Hunter, 82.5 grade. The run defense isn't really there, just a 61. Not terrible, but whatever. Danielle Hunter, though, 24 pressures on 180 attempts and 3 sacks. He is still the same dude. I don't know why. Well, I mean, I do know why the Vikings got rid of him, but geez. Always been a good football player, just consistently. We should have picked that freaking guy up now that we're a 4-3 team. On the other side is Will Anderson, another super talented guy, 81 grade. He was in the 80s too. I thought there wasn't another one. So 2 guys in the 80s, but he's more run defense. Not that there's actually, that statistically that's not true. He's dominating in pass rush. I don't know why his grade is so low. He must be either I get to the quarterback or I get thrown on my face or something. I don't know. But he has a 78 run defense grade. 67 pass rush, but he has 26 pressures on 168 attempts. My good Lord. And 6 sacks. So these pass rushers are absolute demons. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, this is probably one of the better pass rush duos in all of football. It's not great, Bob. After that, they have Derek Barnett. I think he was a longtime Eagle, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, longtime Eagle. He went halfway through the season to Houston. And so far this year in Houston, it hasn't super panned out. 53 run defense, 58 pass rush, 6 pressures, 77 attempts. He's never really been all that good. I remember when they picked him up, they were like very light allusions to Reggie White. I know nobody wanted to officially cross that line, but they kept bringing him up. You know, Philadelphia, the whole thing. It's ridiculous. And then they have Dylan Horton, but he's only played 44 snaps in 2 games. So, unfortunately for us, it doesn't look like they rotate a bunch. They got 2 guys that are very good, and they don't come off the field a ton. So that sucks. At linebacker, number 1 linebacker, again, Aziz Al-Shair. He's got a 75 grade, 79 run defense, but he is out. So he plays the 3rd most snaps on this defense, is one of the highest graded guys, and he's not going to play. Their number 2 at linebacker is Henry To'o. He has got a 62 grade, 74 run defense. He plays the 4th most snaps on the team. He is also not going to play in this game. Their top 2 linebackers are out. Both of them are pretty decent. The only other linebackers that have played any snaps are Neville Hewitt, who played in 2 games, 40 snaps. He did get an 82 grade, which is obviously very good. Unfortunately, though, he is almost 32 years old. We've seen this guy for years. He's never been that good. He played 1 game and played really well against New England. His highest season grade ever was his 2nd year with Houston, 67 PFF grade. So that was his best. So that's kind of what you're dealing with there. And then the other guy, Jake Hansen, who was out of Illinois. He was an undrafted free agent. But he played 11 snaps week 6 against New England. Graded out phenomenally well, and maybe he's a good football player, I don't know. But this is the first time we're going to see him play a full game since week 14 against the Jets, and he played well in that game. 75, he actually played really well in 2023, and in 2022, he also wasn't really that bad. So we'll have to see. Again, there's no question that it's going to be a big step backward when you're, 2 of your top guys on your team, the 2 starters, are going to be out. I mean, there really isn't a comparison, because if I said what if Quay was out, people would be like, oh, good, I don't care. Imagine we had 2 Edger and Coopers, and they're both out, and we have McDuffie and Wilson. It's probably somewhat similar to that, where it's like, it's not bad. It's not the best thing, but, they've been okay. It might be all right. I don't know. At corner, they've got Derek Stingley, Jalen Petrie, and Kamari Lassiter. Stingley with a 75 grade, 76 coverage grade. He's been pretty solid all throughout. He's allowed 17 receptions, 172 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 4 pass breakups. Somewhat inconsistent, though. His coverage grades 48, 70, 61, 90, 73, and 65. So you hope to catch him on like a 60-day and not a 90-day. But he's not an every single game lockdown guy, I guess. Jalen Petrie is their slot/safety guy. He's sort of their Javon Bullard, I guess. He's got a 63 grade, 56 coverage grade. He has given up 18 receptions, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 3 pass breakups, 109.5 passer rating when targeted. And then Kamari Lassiter is a rookie second-round pick out of Georgia, and he's out. He is another guy that is out in this game, and so they're going to have to go all the way down to D'Angelo Ross. He's only one of 2 other guys. By the way, if D'Angelo Ross doesn't play, their starting cornerback will be Kadar Holman. By the way, both of them played in Week 6. D'Angelo Ross was the starter. Kadar Holman was sort of the backup. But D'Angelo Ross, in 3 years, 2021, 2023, and 2024, has only played 134 snaps. He did perform well last week against New England, so we can't be as bad as New England, or they're just going to dominate us with all their freaking backups, that's for sure. But he gave up just 1 target, 1 reception, 9 yards, and that was all he gave up all game, 72 coverage grade, but that is obviously not what you would expect over a season, I guess. So we'll see. Remember, Kadar Holman's the next one up, so if anybody gets dinged up, expect a little bit of a reunion there. And then safety, they actually have a pretty healthy rotation. Kalen Bullock, rookie, surprisingly, is their number 1 dude. He's out there most of the time. Number 2 is Eric Murray. So Bullock, 296 as far as snaps. Eric Murray, 260. Jimmy Ward, 190. Remember, Jimmy Ward is out. So they've got a number 1 safety that is a 3rd-round rookie out of USC. He currently has a 55 grade, 73 run defense, but 50.5 coverage. He's given up 3 receptions, 24 yards. How in the heck does he have such a low grade? 7 targets, just 3 receptions, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a pass breakup, 12.5 grade when targeted. I don't know. He must just be garbage and then fell into a couple picks. I have no idea what the heck they're looking at there, but they do not like him. He did have a good game Week 1 and Week 6, which were the 2 games that he had interceptions. They gave him a 76.7 Week 1 with his 1 pick, a 73.4 with his other. The games in between, they gave him 53, 66, 39, and 33. So do with that what you will, I suppose. Eric Murray is the number 2 safety, 65 overall, 67 run defense, 65 coverage, 22 targets, 11 receptions, 136 yards. He's given up 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, 3 pass breakups. 90.2 passer rating when targeted. He is pretty much what he's always been. He's been with Houston since 2020, before that Cleveland, before that Kansas City. His highest graded season was his last year with Kansas City. He had a 67.8 grade. So that's just what he is. He's a average football player, slightly above average. Then again, you got Jimmy Ward, but he is out, which leaves MJ Stewart. MJ Stewart played 11 snaps last week, 66 grade, 62 run defense, 63 coverage, 0 statistics anywhere. He's extremely volatile with his grades. 58, 61, 41, 84, 70, 60, and so far 66. So he's completely all over the place, 29 years old. He was a 2nd-round pick by the Buccaneers in 2018, only lasted 2 years there. Which, by the way, I had somebody ask me on social media, why would Carolina give up on a young player like J.C. Horn? It just doesn't make any sense. And although I mostly agree, this stuff does happen. Again, MJ Stewart wasn't bad. He was average for 2 years, and Tampa said, meh, I'm done with him, and traded him to Cleveland. Not saying, just saying. All right, so that's about the end of that. So again, really the crux of this defense, first of all, the linebackers were kind of a big part of it, and they're not going to be a part of this game. We'll see how much of a part of it that they really were, and how much not having them maybe changes things. Do you have to make changes to what you do as far as your pass rush? Do you have to make changes in terms of your coverage? Maybe having more guys in coverage. I don't know. I don't know what the plan is. But still, I think the main strength of this defense is the pass rush duo of Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. And that's complemented by Derek Stingley, who usually, again, pretty inconsistent, but is overall a pretty solid corner. Again, 74 grade overall. So those are the 3 main components to this defense, and it is what has made this defense the the so far second best defense in football. All right, let's rip through some of these games here. So we've got our early game again, which is Jacksonville and New England. I don't think anybody has any reason to care about that game. 1-5 versus 1-5. What an absolute freaking disgrace and joke. It's a bad week for football, man. There's a lot of people begging for flexing and all kinds of stuff. It's pretty rough out there. We got Seattle and Atlanta. That one's relevant because it's two NFC teams, again, all vying for those spots. Again, I don't super care at this point. Everybody's still kind of jockeying. On one hand, Atlanta is ahead, so they would end up both going to 4-3 if Seattle wins. But if Atlanta does win, it puts Seattle down to 3-4, which is also not the worst thing in the world. Buffalo, Tennessee, don't matter. Cleveland, Cincinnati, don't care. Green Bay, Houston, obviously. Indy, Miami, don't care. Then we got the big one, Minnesota and Detroit, and I don't know who I'm rooting for here. On one hand, I do think at the end of the day, Detroit is going to be the better team, so dropping them to 4-2 could only help. Plus, it gives us the opportunity to pull ahead here, being a 5-2 football team if we win. And if we lose, then, we don't lose pace necessarily with Detroit. But Minnesota going to 6-0 is a tough pill to swallow. And if Hutchinson didn't go down, I would say I'm fairly confident Detroit wins that game. Just again, because of the, in my mind, the perceived decline of Minnesota, specifically the quarterback, and playing a team that is not going to, allow the things that have happened to happen. Minnesota takes a lead. They use their defense to maintain that lead, and the game's basically over from the start. Detroit is a much tougher opponent from that side of things. I still think it's going to be because you have to stop their offense. Minnesota's defense is quite good, but still I think Detroit can hopefully keep pace with that. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a net positive. The NFC North has just not been losing, like at all. This is a time when one of them has to lose. So we'll just take it as a positive, however, which direction it goes. I don't know who I'm rooting for in that game. I think I just am going to accept one of them has to lose and hope that they both look kind of bad. Philadelphia and the Giants, surprisingly closer than it should be. Giants are 2-4. Philadelphia's 3-2. If the Giants win that game, which I kind of hope they do, the Giants will be 3-4 and Philadelphia will be 3-3. That would be hilarious. Rams, Raiders. I mean, I would like Las Vegas to win because then the Rams would go to 1-5 and their season's basically over, which would be fantastic. However, Las Vegas is kind of imploding and players are kind of moving toward wanting to get off that team. Now that Davante's gone, it gives them even less hope. If they fall to 2-5, I don't know, man. Maybe somebody else comes available. We'll see how it goes. Washington, Carolina. I'm at the point of begging Carolina to find a way to win this game because Washington has become an absolute powerhouse. If Washington loses, they go to 4-3, which is certainly more of a manageable situation. If they win, they're 5-2 with what is right now, by many metrics, the number one quarterback in football in Washington. So scary situation developing there. San Francisco, Kansas City. I hate both of them. I hope they both lose. But if Kansas City wins, San Francisco falls to 3-4. And so that's what needs to happen. I wouldn't be heartbroken if San Francisco wins and cracks Kansas City's win streak of 5-0. But as sick as it makes me, it's really not a hard decision. Kansas City needs to win that game, especially since we're going to play San Francisco. And, I just don't want them to be a very good team, Jets, Pittsburgh. Doesn't really matter. I care less about Pittsburgh now that Justin Fields is not on the team. It could go one of two ways. On one hand, again, I still don't want the Jets to win. I don't want Davante and Rodgers and all of them benefiting from leaving Green Bay. That's just not what I want. Love them both. Can't wait for them to retire, to bring them back into the fold while you're on another team. F you. That's the bottom line. So Pittsburgh beating the Jets would be pretty cool. If the Jets do win, however, the one potential good thing to come out of that is hopefully they bench that jag-off quarterback and put Justin Fields back in. So kind of a win-win, I suppose. Baltimore, Tampa, absolutely rooting for Baltimore, the AFC team. They're both 4-2. Tampa is another team that's kind of pulling away from the pack a little bit. Getting them down to 4-3, closer to 500 would absolutely be the best case scenario. Arizona, another team that's really in dire straits at 2-4, facing another AFC team, the Chargers. If we can drop them to 2-5, again, fantastic. Basically knock them out of the race. At this point, we're basically fighting against the NFC North and like 2 other NFC teams. I mean, that's what it's coming to. New Orleans already got blown out by Denver. New Orleans has been struggling, and you are at peak struggling when you are losing to Denver 33-10. That's about as bad as it gets. But there you go, folks. That's about all that it is. So we've got again, I hate the schedule of this. The early morning game, I'm probably not even going to watch. I do not care at all. Packers play at noon, and unfortunately, so does Minnesota-Detroit, so I'm not going to get to watch that, which is bullcrap. Why they would do that, I have no idea. The 3 o'clock games, San Francisco-Kansas City might be a good game, but it's about the only one worth watching. Rams-Raiders is terrible. Washington-Carolina is going to be terrible. So I guess San Francisco-Kansas City is what we're stuck with, and hoping that Kansas City wins, and if San Francisco pulls away, I'm turning that game off. Sunday night, we get Pittsburgh and the Jets, which sucks. But I guess it's somewhat interesting, again, because of the Rodgers-Devontae dynamic. And then Monday is Tampa-Baltimore, which might be good. But then after that, you get Arizona and the Chargers, which nobody wants to watch. So pretty rough for the schedule makers this week. Anyways, with that, I'm out of here. You guys have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you later, hopefully tomorrow for Victory Monday. Have a good one. Bye-bye.